Between 46 and 60% of all children experience at least one type of trauma by age 18. 26% of children will experience a traumatic event before they turn 4. In 2018, Governor Carney issued Executive Order Number 24, prioritizing efforts for Delaware to become a trauma-responsive state. I recently attended Delaware's Trauma Awareness Conference and had the pleasure of sitting down with Delaware's First Lady, Tracy Carney. I hope you enjoy our talk as much as I did. So what is First Chance Delaware? Maybe we'll start there, because I saw your name, I saw some of the work, and I was like, this is so fascinating. What is this?
First Chance Delaware is our first spouse initiative, and we got some funding from Casey Family Programs to do it. It has 3 pillars: ending childhood hunger in the state, promoting early language skills, sort of the healthy brain development, school readiness kind of language experiences, and the third one, most relevant to today, is promoting greater awareness and more effective response to childhood trauma. So that's where my work has merged with all this other good stuff in Trauma Matters Delaware, where I'm an honorary board member, and the Family Services Cabinet Council work, and the work so many people are doing now in promoting healing and ultimately preventing long-term impacts of traumatic experiences, which is the real goal.
Yeah. And what's your history? Like, what's your background?
I grew up in Newcastle, and my first 2 careers before this role, I worked for the president when he was our senator for 15 years, and I worked at Friends School for 15 years. So those were my first 2 careers. I'm sort of considering this First Lady gig my 3rd career. But my background in terms of my interest in trauma is that I myself had an unaddressed childhood trauma that had long-term impacts. So I know from just, and that was with all the advantages in the world. I was not wouldn't have been judged at risk in any way, really. So knowing what that did to me with all those advantages, I have a lot of empathy for what it can do to people who don't have all those advantages. And I think that has really inspired my work in this particular realm.
So how did you come to be a part of the board of the Trauma, I'm going to say it wrong.
Trauma Matters Delaware.
Yeah, how did you get
Trauma Matters Delaware started a while ago as an all-volunteer network, really information sharing network, and I was not involved then. And then as we got more serious, with recognizing the brain science of trauma and what needed to be done, there was the thought that Trauma Matters Delaware really should be a backbone nonprofit in the state, because we didn't have one.
Yeah. And how many years ago was that about? When it started to be like a little bit more
I would
serious?
say 6 or 7 years ago, where we started talking about how this work should evolve.
Oh, wow.
And I don't take credit for doing any of the work. The real work was done by other people. But we had Social Contract help us develop a trauma blueprint for this state, and we thought there was a need for a backbone nonprofit. There really wasn't one. And that's when Trauma Matters Delaware started the road to being a 501c3, sorry, and formed a board and invited me to join.
And then part of what they do today with the trauma-informed piece is?
Trauma Matters Delaware is still becoming itself.
Okay.
But it's done a great job giving people reliable information, giving people reliable referrals to reliable training programs, raising awareness, which is sort of the biggest part of my role.
Yeah.
I would say I'm like a head cheerleader. Which of course I never was before. But that's Trauma Matters Delaware is a really important part of the equation, along with the Family Services Cabinet Council and the organizations in schools. Higher ed is a big part of Trauma Matters Delaware, that subcommittee, because they're training the workforce.
Yes.
They're training the teachers, the next generation teachers and healthcare providers and all that stuff.
They're infusing it into their curriculum.
Exactly. I think our colleges and universities have played a tremendous leadership role
That's really good.
That
Yeah,
I'm sure not everyone's aware of.
Yeah. I mean, talking to the teachers today, including myself,
Yeah.
we sit there with these issues and we're like, we're not the experts,
Right.
and yet they come to us every day.
Exactly.
And what are we going to say? And then we just feel the lack of not being able to help and support.
Well,
and
we're
so,
all there. We're all in that boat. Not
Yeah.
just teachers. I mean,
Yeah.
we're all catching up now. But thanks to, I think, the work that's being done, DSU, UD, Del Tech, I'm missing one. Wilmington University actually has been a tremendous leader in this work.
Awesome.
That's going to get better.
Yeah,
That's going to get better.
absolutely.
I mean, awareness really is critical. It's not enough, obviously, but it really is critical, and we've come a long way because of it.
Yeah, especially with this conference today.
Yep.
And
I remember the first one.
5 years ago,
Yeah.
right? This is the fifth one?
This is the fifth. And it's sometimes it's easy to see how much there is still to do, but we also need to celebrate how far we've come.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. And in checking out that website, I noticed there's like workshops that they offer just periodically, a couple times a month or
A lot of
something like
online
that.
events.
Yeah.
Yep. It's
so-
very easy to learn now.
Yeah, that's
And it
really-
wasn't before.
Yeah,
So
you're
we-
right. So it's more
there's
accessible.
a lot of resources are much more available than they were before.
And I appreciate you saying that you sharing your story of that you came from, that you had, and you still needed help in some way, because there are schools that are in areas that seem affluent or have, and we're not eligible for family crisis therapists or social workers and things like that. And yet we have students with trauma, we have students with needs, and sometimes they're episodic and they kind of blow up periodically and might not be the majority of the kids all the time. And so, that's why you're right.
Recognition
this
is
work
really important. I mean, I talk about how my life was really upended by unaddressed trauma, and the issue was a lack of information. It wasn't, people didn't have bad intentions.
Right.
It wasn't,
I believe
it
that.
was a lack of information.
They're all doing the best they can
Yep.
with what they know today.
Yep.
They really are showing up. Educators and the parents.
Yep.
As much as sometimes we like to be like, oh, they X, Y, and Z. You know what? They all are doing the best they can. Was there anything
No,
last
thank you
wanna
for your
end
interest.
for-
I want to thank educators because, again, having worked in a school for 15 years, as well as having gone to school myself, what educators have to do for kids, what we need our educators to do for kids is a lot. And self-care is a really important thing in our schools. So the more I think we can support our educators with self-care and with good information, I think the easier that really hard job is going to be. But I want to thank all of our teachers and people in schools. It's I always say my favorite people are teachers and nurses. So thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Well, that's all we've got for this episode of the Momnificent podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be honored if you would subscribe and rate if you really liked it. I know wherever you're listening right now, it might not be the best time to leave a comment, but feel free to leave a question, a review, or a comment at any time. And until next time, remember, don't worry, be happy.